Hello Year 11, this is a quick video just to go through a sample answer for the paper 1, question 2 and question 4 timed assessment that you did this week, so that you can use this video to revise if you've got your piece of writing in front of you. Now this is the story, it was called The Clan of the Cave Bear, and you had your question 1 and you had your question 2, and you had your question 4. Okay, so just a reminder that you had those 2 questions there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm mainly going to focus on I'm going to do a video for question 1, and then I'll do a video for question 4 as well, so that you've got kind of that to help you with your revision. Now remember, the things that I pick out in the text are not the only things that are there. There are so many things. I just want to give you just a reminder of how to put a paragraph together and how you can quite quickly get into that level 3 by doing just a few certain things to your responses. Okay, so we're going to look at question 2 first of all, which is, remember, you've got the extract there and your question, and it tells you the lines. One of the things that we've put on this one is that the question 2 used the end of the source, which is unusual, and it's more because we were looking to see if you were reading the lines that you need to be able to do this question. So one of the things that you would have noticed is that actually question 4, let me just quickly go to question 4. Okay, so question 4 was lines 1 to 22. Okay, so you've got it here. So that was lines 1 to all the way to 22. That was for your question 1. And no, sorry, 4. Sorry, question 4. And then 23 to 33 was your question 2. Now, this was more to check that you are reading the question and you are addressing the lines. It wasn't meant to trick you. It was just to make sure that you are reading those bits of the question to make sure that you get the stuff from the right place. Okay, so let's have a look at question 2. As usual, before I read the extract, I always read the focus of the question. And there's a few words on this question that you need to kind of highlight and remember. So the first one is, how does the writer use language here to describe the girl's reaction to the earthquake? Now, whenever I get a language question, I always like to follow TP, okay? Now, the reason why I like to follow TP is that it ensures that I am talking about language. I'm not writing a literature-like essay, that all my response is going back to that language. So I start with talking about a technique. I put my evidence. I then talk about how that technique is being used there. And I answer the question. So it's kind of like a purpose point. I know that some of you like to start it with petal. I would put just your point after you've mentioned the language, just to make sure that it links to that language, and then your effects. Now, when I do effects, I always use kind of the same structure. I use magic circles because I'm going to zoom in on a word. So zoom in on a word. Okay. I put the word that I'm going to zoom in from the text, not one of my analysis, from the text. And then I try to say at least 3 to 4 ideas, okay? Now, the phrases that I like to use is create an image of, and then highlights, and then emphasizes, and then symbolizes. Okay, so I try to say 4 things. Now, if you're trying to really hit that higher kind of mark, you might actually do kind of analyzing 2 or 3 words from a quote, and that allows you to be like that bit more developed and so forth. Now, in this question, one of the things that we've noticed over the years is that there are definitely 3 techniques that you will always find in these extracts. There's possible 5 techniques that there will always be in these extracts. So number 1, you always have somewhere a simile. You always have a metaphor. you always have personification. You have semantic fields. And then you might have a contrast. Okay? Now, one of the things that you need to be careful, though, is that the writer may have used a simile, but that simile may not help you answer the question. So you have to make sure that you are answering the question. Whatever you choose answers the focus of the question. Now, the focus of the question is about the girl's reaction to the earthquake. So how is she feeling as she's experiencing this earthquake? So now I'm going to read the extract. Now, as I read the extract, I'm going to highlight any words I think emphasize actually her reaction, because it's important. You need to be answering the focus of the question, her reaction to the earthquake. So the girl started at the sound of the falling tree. Now, there you go. So the girl, that's a reaction. Her stomach churned and tightened into a knot as the fear brushed the edge of her mind. Now, that's a brilliant line. Her stomach churned and tightened into a knot as fear brushed the edge of her mind. She tried to stand but fell back, unbalanced by the sickening swaying. Now, loads there. She fell back, she was unbalanced by the sickening swaying. She tried again, managed to pull herself up, and stood unsteadily, afraid to take a step. So actually, I've got that there, afraid. As she started towards the hide-covered shelter set back from the stream, she felt a low rumble rise to a terrifying roar. A sour stench. Now she felt a low. Now this is actually what she's feeling in terms of the earthquake moving. So I want to highlight that. A sour stench of wetness and rot issued from a crack opening in the ground, like a reek of morning breath from the yawning earth. Now, this is a simile, but it's not necessarily describing the girl's behavior or how she feels. It's more describing how the earth is being pushed apart. So I might not necessarily look at this one, but I'm just kind of highlighting it for now. She stared uncomprehendingly. I'm going to definitely highlight that adverb there. At dirt and rocks and small trees falling into the widening gap as the cool shell of molten planet cracked into convulsion. Okay, so there she's more confused. The lean-to, now remember the lean-to is her shelter where she's trying to go to, perched on the far edge of the abyss, tilted as half the solid ground beneath it pulled away. The slender ridge pool teetered undecidedly, then collapsed and disappeared into the deep hole, taking its high cover and all it contained with it. The girl trembled, wide-eyed horror, as the foul breath, gaping more. Okay, so that's the hole that's opened. Swallow everything that had given meaning and security. So everything that had given meaning and security to the 5 short years of her life. So in general, when I think about this question, I think the girl is definitely, her reaction is one of fear and confusion. Okay, now a lot of the reason why she is really, really scared is because she doesn't understand actually what's going on. Sorry, I'm just going to grab something. Sorry about that. She's really scared and quite petrified in general. Okay, so what I'm gonna start like now. This is how I'm gonna start my answer. The first thing that I always need to remember is that for this question, you start your answer like this. So the writer uses, then you put your technique. Okay, so the writer uses technique when so when she writes, then you put your quote, okay? To describe, now this is our purpose and point. Now to describe, this is where I put the focus of the question. So to describe the girl's reaction, you need to make sure that you have that focus of the question in your answer as, and then you kind of give an inference or your own reading of that, and then you start zooming in. The use of the word, put your word, and then you do create an image. Now I might put the focus of the question that the girl feels. I put that, and then I would put highlighting. And I put my other idea. In addition, or furthermore, this emphasizes another idea and overall symbolizes. And then my other idea. That's just the basic, just to get a 3 or a 4 out of 8. Now, like I said, there are loads of techniques. I've already highlighted loads, but in particular, I'm going to focus on this idea of her stomach churned and tightened into a knot as fear brushed the edge of her mind. Mainly because I've got here like that use of a metaphor. Her stomach tightened into a knot. This is a very metaphorical kind of language, but I love that sentence in particular because there are so many things that I can actually focus on. I can focus on the word churned, I can focus on the word tightened, then I can actually develop that by talking about a knot. Okay, those two are connected. Then I've got kind of that use or maybe even personification of fear. Okay, that is overtaken, brushed, when past, like that language is affecting her. And then you've got the edge of her mind. Now, I really like this, in particular, this one piece of evidence, because not only can I talk about the physical effects of the earthquake on the girl, but also the psychological, sorry, I can't spell psychological for a minute, psychological impact. So there is so much that I can actually focus on in this question, because not only do I have the physical, I also got the psychological, because I've got those two ideas actually within that sentence. I could also talk actually about this idea of feeling unbalanced if I wanted to. There is a semantic feel of feeling out of control. So you've got that in terms of, again, churned, tightened, fell back, unbalanced, the swaying, all of those things actually create a semantic feel that she's not in control. Okay, so you might want to say that. So F, semantic feel of out of control. I personally wouldn't talk too much about this bit here, because that's actually more about the earthquake and what the earthquake is doing. Just because there is a danger, and I've seen it already marking some responses, that pupils will focus more on how the earthquake is being described and talking about the power of nature, rather than actually answering the focus of the question, which is the girl's reaction to the earthquake. So that becomes actually really important. There are a few things though here. Not only do I have she felt a low rumble and a terrifying roar. Now, like the word terrifying here does emphasize actually how scared she is. But again, you get the physical versus the psychological with the idea of uncomprehendingly. Like she can't understand. She's confused. She is lost. So you've got, again, both the physical and the psychological. And then the ending is actually feeling that total sense of loss and fear. You got that adjective wide-eye horror, suggesting like the extent of how petrified and the terror that the girl is feeling as she watches the earth take her home, and then swallowed everything. Like, I think here, this idea of swallowed, I do like that personification. It's describing the earthquake, But if you could link it to the way that she feels like overwhelmed because everything that she once owned has been taken from her. Okay, so that actually becomes quite a good idea. So one of the things that I'm going to do now is I'm going to write you a sample paragraph. You can check your own. You can use this to help you revise in general. So I'm just going to kind of push it like this so I can see my notes. Okay, so you can see that. So I'm going to write to here so that you hopefully, I still got my planner on the side, and then I've got this here. Actually, I might rip it, it just makes it easier. There you go. Okay, so let's have a look. So I'm going to start, like I said, with the writer uses. Okay, so I'm going to start with the writer uses. Now, like I said, I'm going to focus on this metaphor. I really like this metaphor. Her stomach churned and tightened into a knot. The writer uses a metaphor when she writes her stomach churned and tightened into a knot as fear brushed the edge of her mind. Okay, now usually I wouldn't choose a quote like this because it's a bit too long, or I might quote like bits of it in general, but I just want to show you how even though this is quite a long quote, it's got so much in it that is going to allow you to develop your answer. Okay, so now what do I do after that? So let me just check. I've done this bit about the technique. I've done my evidence. So I'm adding that to describe the girl's reaction. So I need to like finish that. So to describe. Now, it is about the girl's reaction. So I'm going to add the idea of the physical and psychological effects. To describe the physical and psychological effects of the earthquake on the girl, highlighting let me just try that again. Highlighting how she feels scared and petrified. Okay, so now, as you can see, I'm just building it up. So at the moment, I'm probably like on a level 2. So I've answered my question. I've got my technique, and then I've already said something that is quite sophisticated, but I haven't developed it. So there's no way it's going to get into a level 3. I've talked about the physical, the psychological effects of the earthquake on the girl, highlighting how she feels scared and petrified. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on like loads of words. Now remember, you're not allowed to highlight your answer in the exam, but I'm going to do it just for the purpose of you seeing how I zoom into things. Now the first thing that I might do is this idea of, I could talk actually about the semantic field that's being used within the metaphor, but I'm going to zoom in on the metaphor first. So the fact that her stomach is tightened into a knot, I'm going to highlight that first, and I'm going to zoom in onto that idea. So the writer's use of the metaphor into a knot. So I start doing my magic circle. So what does a knot make me think of? Well, it makes me think of this idea of being kind of restrained. It makes me think of actually feeling paralyzed. It makes me feel, well, I think it suggests that it makes you feel trapped. Now, if you feel trapped, you might feel that you lack control and so feel powerless. Okay, so I'm just getting my ideas ready. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I could say about the word not. So the writer's use of the metaphor into a not. So I start with my create an image of. So look at this. Create an image of. So I'm using my magic circles really. Create an image of the girl feeling restrained. So I've got one idea there, and I'm going to put and paralyzed by her fear. This image highlights how the girl feels trapped. Now I'm going to explain because it's good to explain, because of the sudden and unexpected nature of the earthquake, meaning she could not prepare. Okay, so I'm just explaining my idea a tiny bit more. So have I done initialize the idea that she's strapped, and then I put the word because. That's really fancy. This emphasizes how the girl feels a lack of control over her surroundings, symbolizing her feelings of powerlessness. Okay, now let's have a look at how many things have been said about the word not. So we've got the writer uses the metaphor into a not to create an image of the girl feeling restrained and paralyzed by her fear. This image highlights, look at that. So I've done like create an image of, I've done highlights. Okay, so I'm using these analytical verbs to develop my answer. This image highlights how the girl feels trapped because of the sudden and unexpected nature of the earthquake. Now, I will say that this is probably going to push me more to the top of that level 3, because I've also used the word because to explain my idea. An unexpected nature of the earthquake, meaning she could not prepare. This emphasizes again, look at that, the idea of analyzing. So I've got trap, could not prepare. This emphasizes how the girl feels a lack of control over her surroundings, symbolizing her powerlessness. Okay, so look at that in general, in terms of how much I said. And now, one of the things that I might say, because I've got loads in that quote, I might actually zoom in on the words churned and tighten. Okay, so I would say something like this. Furthermore, comma, the writer, so again focusing on the language, the writer uses the verbs churned and tightened to further, so I'm kind of further doing a purpose and point here, highlight the physical effects of the earthquake on the girl. The use of the verb tightened creates a similar idea to the image of the knot, in that the girl is trapped by her fear, but also emphasizes her unease and panic, which is overwhelming her. The verb churned creates an image that the girl feels discomfort and uncertainty physically, but also highlights the psychological impact as she's in turmoil, as she doesn't understand what is happening. Now, I'm trying to push my answer into that level 4. So look at how much, even with that one quote, I'm saying about one word. So I zoomed in on the word churned and tightened. So I've said that again, like the writer's using those verbs churned and tightened to further highlight the physical effects of the earthquake on the girl. The use of the verb tighten creates a similar idea as not. I mean, I've repeated trap there, so I'm not that happy with that. And by her fear, but also emphasizes her unease and panic, which is overwhelming. The verb churn creates an image that the girl feels discomfort and uncertainty physically, but also highlights the psychological impact as she's in turmoil, as she doesn't understand what's happening. So look at the way that you're saying so many things, what is all linked and focused actually on the language. The last bit that I might want to really highlight in that quote is this idea of talking about the edge of her mind. Because one of the things that you might want to say is how that focus on her mind really shows how it is an all overwhelming, disorientating kind of experience for the girl. So finally, so I might just put here because it's all in the same quote. Finally, comma, the description, let's put it, the description of how fear the girls, actually it is metaphorical, that is like finally the personification, let's put the personification. Okay, so finally the personification of how fear brushed the girls I'm going to put here mind, create an image that every aspect of the girl's existence is being affected by the earthquake affecting the girl's mind, comma, it shows how she has lost all power and control over herself due to the power, sorry, I'm just going to fill it here, the power due to, no, her feelings of terror. Okay, so now this is kind of like bringing it to that end. I got another technique there. I want to mention that idea of the mind. And if you notice, it's more of an explanation. There is zooming in into the language, but I've done enough in general there. So hopefully that would push an answer into a level 4. Is this idea that you want to have, and know if this is probably the challenge, is having loads of different words to explore the meaning that is being emphasized. One of the questions that I like to ask myself as I'm going through zooming in on a word, I tend to think, what does that word make me think of? And how does that link to the focus of the question? So I always go back to that in general. So hopefully that helps you think about how to put an answer together for this question. So good luck with your revision.